I knew something was wrong the moment I walked into my apartment and saw my dress uniform hanging by the window like it belonged to someone else. The medal ceremony was less than 4 hours away, and the only people I wanted in that room had already decided they had somewhere better to be. My own family chose my sister's backyard barbecue over the day I had spent 12 years bleeding, training, and breaking myself to reach, and the worst part was not the excuse they gave me. It was how normal they made it sound, like missing the biggest moment of my life was just another harmless scheduling mix-up, just another day where I was expected to understand. I stood there with one hand still on the doorknob, keys pressing into my palms so hard they left little crescents in my skin. Sunlight cut across the room in a sharp stripe, catching the brass buttons on my uniform and making them glow. For a second, it looked beautiful. It should have felt like pride. Instead, my throat closed so tight I had to force air into my lungs one breath at a time. My phone was still in my hand, and my mother's message sat open on the screen. She had written that they were sorry, but my sister had already bought the meat, invited the neighbors, and planned the whole day around the cookout. And since my ceremony was downtown with parking and traffic and all that hassle, they thought it would be easier if they celebrated me another time. Another time, as if moments waited around politely for people who couldn't be bothered. I read those words so many times they stopped looking like language, they just became proof. I'm the older one. That sentence explains more about my family than it should. Growing up, it meant I was the practice child, the reliable one, the one expected to be mature before I even understood what that meant. My sister Layla was 3 years younger than me and born with the kind of charm that made adults forgive her before she even did anything wrong. If she forgot, people laughed. If I forgot, people asked what was wrong with me. If she cried, everyone rushed in. If I cried, I was reminded how much harder our parents had it and how I shouldn't make things worse. It wasn't cruelty in the obvious way. That would have been easier to name. It was softer than that, built out of 1,000 tiny moments that taught me my feelings were always slightly inconvenient. Our house had always run on invisible math. Who needs the most? Who makes the least noise? Who is easiest to disappoint? By the time I was 16, I already knew which category I belonged to. That's probably why I joined the service the first chance I got. People like to turn choices like that into something noble and clean, but mine wasn't. I wanted structure. I wanted distance. I wanted to live in a world where effort actually counted for something and where showing up meant more than being likable. I wanted to earn a version of myself no one could dismiss. Training gave me bruises, stress fractures, calluses, and a silence in my head I had never known before. It also gave me something my family never really had, a measurable kind of respect. Not affection, not comfort, respect. If you've ever spent years feeling half visible, you know exactly how powerful that can be. I still came home when I could, I still sent money when things got tight. My father's hours at the machine shop had been cut twice in 5 years. My mother cleaned houses part-time until her back started giving out. Layla bounced between jobs, hobbies, and unfinished plans the way some people scroll through channels, never staying anywhere long enough for consequences to land. There was always some reason she needed help, a car repair, a rent gap, a credit card she forgot to pay. A dog she adopted too fast and couldn't afford. And somehow, even from 2 states away, I was still the person who stepped in. I told myself that was what family meant. I told myself loyalty looked like being useful. When the call came 3 months before the ceremony, I almost missed it because I was running late. My commanding officer told me I had been selected to receive a Distinguished Service Medal for a rescue operation the previous winter. I remember sitting down so hard on the edge of my bunk that the frame rattled. My body went cold first, then hot, like my blood couldn't decide what to do. I had replayed that operation more times than I could count. The storm, the collapsed bridge, the freezing water, the 2 civilians trapped in a truck hanging half over the ravine. I remembered the rope cutting into my gloves, the sound of metal twisting, the weight of another person's life in my hands. I remembered thinking I might not get back up. I remembered getting back up anyway. Awards never mattered to me as much as surviving did, but this one was different. It felt like someone had taken the worst night of my life and found meaning in it. It felt like a witness. And stupidly, embarrassingly, the first thing I thought after the shock wore off was that maybe this would be the day my family finally saw me clearly. Not as the dependable one, not as the one who could handle disappointment. Me. I called my mother that night. She cried. She told me how proud she was. She said she wouldn't miss it for the world. My father got on the phone next and cleared his throat the way he did when feelings embarrassed him. He said he had always known I was strong. Even Layla sounded excited. She asked what everyone should wear, whether there would be photos, whether she could tell people her sister was getting a medal from the governor. For a few shining minutes, I let myself believe that maybe I had judged them too harshly. Maybe everyone grows up eventually. Maybe people surprise you in good ways too. Looking back, the warning signs were there almost immediately. My mother kept asking if the date was flexible, as if events like that moved around like dentist appointments. My father grumbled about the drive, then about the suit he would have to wear, then about missing a Saturday to sit in a room listening to speeches. Layla complained that the ceremony weekend was the same weekend as her new boyfriend's planned barbecue and joked that I was being dramatic for getting recognition in the middle of summer. She said it lightly, laughing through it, and everyone else laughed too. That should have landed harder than it did. But when you spend your life learning how to swallow hurt before it inconveniences anybody else, you get very good at calling red flags harmless little misunderstandings. A month before the ceremony, I mailed home formal invitations embossed with navy lettering. I paid extra for thick paper because I wanted it to feel official in their hands. I included parking details, the schedule, nearby hotels, even a printed note telling them I had reserved a lunch table afterwards so we could celebrate together. I remember sealing each envelope carefully, pressing the flap down with the side of my thumb, feeling ridiculous for how much hope I was trying to glue inside paper. This part still makes me pause when I think about it. 2 weeks later, my mother called to ask whether I could maybe cancel the lunch reservation because Layla wanted to do something more casual if there was time after the ceremony. She said sit-down restaurants made Layla nervous because money was tight and she didn't want to feel embarrassed ordering the cheapest thing on the menu. I told her I was paying for everything. My mother exhaled in that weary way that meant I was missing the point. She said it wasn't really about the money, it was about making the day comfortable for everyone. Comfortable. Even then, the ceremony itself seemed to have become a backdrop for managing my sister's feelings. Layla had a way of pulling gravity toward herself without seeming to notice. When she was 24, she got engaged after 6 months to a guy who sold gym memberships and wore sunglasses indoors. They announced it at my father's birthday dinner by setting her ring hand next to the cake and waiting for someone to gasp. My father did. My mother cried. I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. 3 months later, the engagement ended when he disappeared with her laptop and $2,000 she had lent him from a card she couldn't pay off. My parents covered half that debt. I covered the other half. No one asked if I could afford it. They just assumed I would find a way because I always did. The truth I avoided for years was ugly in its simplicity. Being the strong one in a family like mine meant people stopped seeing your sacrifices as sacrifices. They became your personality, your function, your job. The week of the ceremony, everything started slipping in little ways. My father stopped answering questions about where they were staying. My mother texted less. Layla posted photos online of grocery carts full of paper plates, soda, burger buns, and those ridiculous little string lights people use to make ordinary patios look like magazine spreads. I stared at one picture of marinated chicken and stacked coolers until my vision blurred. She had captioned it with something about the perfect family weekend. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like missing a stair. I called her, she didn't pick up. I called my mother. She answered on the fourth ring, breathless, the sound of a television playing in the background. I asked her directly if they were still coming. There was a pause on the line so long I thought the call had frozen. Then she started talking in careful, smoothing words like she was laying blankets over broken furniture. She said everyone was exhausted, and gas was expensive, and Layla had already invited people, and the weather forecast was perfect, and couldn't we all just celebrate me the next weekend instead? She said the medal would still be mine whether they saw it in person or not. I remember walking to my kitchen sink because my knees sud. An ly felt hollow. I gripped the edge of the counter until the metal bit into my palms. My voice came out thinner than I meant it to when I asked her if she hurt herself. She sighed, not a shocked sigh, not a guilty one, an irritated one. She said I was making her feel awful when she was trying to be practical. Then she said the sentence that split something in me clean down the middle. She said Layla had put so much effort into this barbecue, and it would be selfish to expect everyone to drop everything for a ceremony that would probably be long and boring anyway. Long and boring. 12 years, torn muscles, burned skin, a winter rescue that still woke me up at night, and to her the day it would all be recognized was long and boring. If you've ever had someone reduce your whole life to an inconvenience, then you know there are silences that do not feel empty at all. They feel loud enough to bruise. I ended the call because if I had stayed on it, I would have said something that couldn't be taken back. Then I did what I had done all my life. I tried to make their choice make sense. Maybe they were embarrassed about money. Maybe my mother was under stress. Maybe my father hated formal events more than I knew. Maybe Layla had manipulated the situation. Maybe. I kept handing them better motives than the ones their actions deserved. That night, my best friend Tessa came over with takeout, and one look at my face was enough. Tessa had known me since training. She was the kind of person who never rushed to fill silence, which made people tell the truth around her without realizing it. I handed her my phone. She read my mother's message, then set the phone down face up on the table like it had dirt on it. She didn't tell me to calm down. She didn't say family is complicated. She just looked at me with this steady, unblinking sadness and asked why I was still acting surprised when they had been rehearsing for this moment my entire life. I wanted to argue. My jaw tightened so hard I felt pain behind my ears. But the truth of what she said settled into me like cold water. She wasn't accusing them of hating me. She was saying something worse. That they had learned over years and years that I would absorb anything. That no matter how often they let me down, I would keep translating neglect into love because that was easier than grieving what I never had. I barely slept the night before the ceremony. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind ran in circles. I kept imagining the empty seats. I kept seeing families clapping, hugging, taking photos. I kept hearing my mother's voice calling the day long and boring. By dawn, my stomach was sour and my skin felt too tight for my body. I dressed slowly. Shirt first, trousers, belt, jacket. Each movement felt ceremonial in a way the actual ceremony suddenly didn't. When I pinned my ribbons in place, my fingers shook so badly I had to stop twice. The metal box sat unopened on the dresser because recipients weren't supposed to wear it beforehand, but I kept glancing at it like it might explain something. The venue was an old civic hall with marble floors and tall windows that made everyone look sharper than real life. Tessa came with me because there was never a question that she would. She wore a navy dress and carried herself with the kind of quiet certainty I wished I felt. Inside the lobby, people clustered in little islands of pride, parents adjusting collars, spouses fixing ties, kids fidgeting in shiny shoes. I could smell perfume, coffee, and the faint waxy scent of polished stone. Every few seconds, a burst of laughter would rise and bounce off the ceiling. My chest was so tight it hurt. I told myself I didn't care who was there, that I was an adult, not a child waiting to be chosen in a schoolyard. But then one by one, the recipients around me were embraced before going in. A mother grabbed both sides of her son's face and kissed his forehead. A father slapped his daughter lightly on the shoulder, proud and awkward. An older couple cried openly beside their grandson while he pretended not to notice. And there I was, standing in full dress uniform with nobody from my blood family in sight, trying to keep my face neutral while my insides felt like splintered glass. Tessa touched my elbow once, gently, and that almost broke me more than anything else. The ceremony began, names were called, stories were read. Some were longer than others, but every single one carried weight: service, sacrifice, courage under pressure, duty. The words echoed through the hall, grand and formal and almost unreal. When my name was called, I stood automatically. My legs felt distant, like they belonged to someone walking just ahead of me. I crossed the stage, saluted, accepted the medal, shook hands. The applause came in a warm wave. Cameras flashed. Somewhere in the crowd, Tessa was standing and clapping hard enough to make up for 10 people. I should tell you that I felt proud in that moment. I did a little, but there was something else under it, something heavier. Grief has a strange timing. It doesn't always wait for the sad parts. Sometimes it arrives right in the middle of the thing you worked hardest for, just to make sure you understand who noticed and who didn't. After the ceremony, people spilled into the hallways for photos and congratulations. Metal boxes opened. Flowers changed hands. I stood near one of the big windows with Tessa while sunlight flashed off the glass case in my hands. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. I checked it. Layla had posted a video. Music, laughter, smoke rising from a grill. My father flipping burgers in an apron I bought him 3 Christmases ago. My mother carrying out a bowl of potato salad. The caption said, "Family time is the best time." Something in me went completely still. I didn't cry, that's what I expected to happen, but it wasn't tears. It was quieter and colder, like a wire had been cut. I watched the video again with the sound off, and suddenly every year of my life lined up in perfect, brutal order. All the birthdays where my gifts got folded into group presents for practical reasons. All the phone calls where they asked about money before asking how I was. All the holidays rearranged around Layla's schedule. All the times I had driven 6 hours home only to spend the weekend fixing shelves, paying bills, or babysitting crises I didn't create. It wasn't one day. It was a pattern so consistent it might as well have been a family tradition. That's when I understood something I wish I had learned much earlier. I was never the heart of that family. I was the backup generator. They only noticed me when the power went out. That was the line that kept replaying in my head, sharp and clean and impossible to soften. I was never the heart of that family. I was the backup generator. You already know where this is going, or maybe you think you do. I thought the pain peaked there, in that bright hallway with my medal in my hand and the barbecue video on my screen. I thought the worst part was finally seeing the truth. I was wrong. Because an hour later, while Tessa and I were sitting at the lunch table I had reserved for 6 people, and only 2 seats were filled, my father called. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Tessa watched me without speaking. My pulse thudded in my neck. Finally, I answered. He didn't ask how the ceremony went. He didn't congratulate me. He didn't apologize. He launched straight into a strained explanation about Layla's boyfriend causing a scene. Apparently, he had gotten drunk before noon, started arguing with one of the neighbors, and then backed his truck into the fence. There was damage to the fence, damage to the truck, and somehow, because Layla's life moved on pure chaos, there was also a problem with his insurance and a question about who had been drinking and whose property was involved. My father's voice had that clipped panic men use when they're trying not to sound helpless. Then he said he needed me to send money, just for now, just until they sorted things out. I stared at the bread basket in the middle of the table until it went blurry around the edges. My hand holding the phone began to shake, not with weakness, with the kind of rage that starts at the base of your spine and climbs slowly, lighting up every nerve it touches. My father kept talking, telling me not to make this into something bigger than it was, telling me family helps family, telling me Layla was already upset enough and didn't need judgment on top of everything else. The room around me faded, silverware clinked, a server laughed somewhere near the bar. The smell of roasted garlic and butter turned suddenly nauseating. On the chair beside me sat the metal box, still open, the ribbon catching light. My family had skipped the ceremony, skipped the meal, skipped me, and still somehow believed I existed on standby for their emergencies. I said no. Just that one word, calm, flat, final. My father went silent. It was the first real silence of the conversation. Then he asked what was wrong with me. Something almost funny moved through me then, bitter and strange. My chest felt both heavy and hollow at once. What was wrong with me? Not what had they done, not how had they hurt me. What was wrong with me for finally not making it easier? I told him I had just received a medal, and he had not even asked how it went. I told him they chose a barbecue over being there. I told him that asking me for money on the same day was something I would remember for the rest of my life. My voice didn't rise, but I could feel my heart hammering so hard the table seemed to vibrate beneath my wrists. He snapped back that I was being dramatic and keeping score like a child. He said the world didn't stop because I got some shiny piece of metal. Then he said I had always thought I was better than the rest of them. That one hit deeper than I expected because it exposed the lie underneath everything. In their minds, wanting basic respect from them was arrogance. Needing to matter was me acting superior. My entire body went cold. I realized there was nothing I could say that would teach them how to value me. People only change when losing you feels more painful than using you. My family had never reached that point because I had never made them. So I said something I had never said in my life. I told him not to contact me for money again, not today, not next week, not when Layla fell into another mess, not when bills got tight, not when guilt was easier than gratitude. I said I was done being the emergency fund for people who could not show up for one chair, 1 hour, one moment that mattered to me. Then I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I had to put the phone on the table. Tessa reached across and covered my fist with her hand. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear hit the white tablecloth and bloomed into a gray spot. Not loud crying, not dramatic, just silent tears sliding down a face gone numb. My whole body felt like it had run a race while sitting still. You might think that was the climax. In some ways it was. The no, the boundary, the part where something broke open and could not be put back the old way. But life has a cruel sense of timing, and sometimes it waits until after you finally stand up for yourself to show you how necessary that was. That evening, I got a message from my mother. I expected anger or guilt. Instead, it was a photo. My family at the barbecue, smiling into the camera while my medal ceremony was still happening. My father in the apron, my mother with a paper plate. Layla pressed against her boyfriend, both of them grinning with their drinks raised. My mother had sent it accidentally, I think. She followed with a second message almost immediately, saying wrong person, then asking if I could please not upset my father more because his blood pressure had been high all day. I looked at that photo for a long time. The ease on their faces was the part that hurt most. There was no strain, no regret, no shadow of having missed anything important, just a family enjoying the day together, completely at peace with my absence. That picture changed everything. Because until then, some part of me was still clinging to the idea that they had made a hard decision, that they felt bad, that circumstances had forced their hand, but the photo told the truth. They weren't torn, they weren't ashamed, they were happy, and once you see that kind of clarity, you can't unsee it. Tell me I'm not alone in this feeling, the one where the final proof hurts less like a knife and more like a lock clicking open. Over the next week, calls and messages piled up. My father left a voicemail saying I had embarrassed him by refusing to help. My mother wrote long paragraphs about family unity and how resentment poisons the soul. Layla sent a text so careless it actually made me laugh out loud in my kitchen. She said she was sorry if I felt unsupported, but honestly the ceremony sounded intense and she had been under a lot of stress lately too. If I could spot her a few $100s just until payday, that would help everyone calm down. That was the moment the old version of me finally died. Not in a dramatic explosion, not in a speech. In a tiny apartment on a Tuesday night, still wearing socks, staring at a text message so absurd it stripped all sentimentality away. I laughed once, short and sharp, and then I blocked her number. Blocking my sister felt like stepping off a ledge and finding solid ground instead of air. Then I blocked my father. My mother was harder. My thumb hovered over her contact photo for what felt like an hour. She had made my school lunches. She used to rub my back when I got migraines as a kid. She taught me how to hem a skirt and make rice without measuring the water. Love was there, that was the problem. It was there, just not enough to protect me, not enough to stop her from making me the easiest sacrifice in every room. My chest tightened so badly I had to sit on the floor beside the couch. Then I blocked her too. The silence after that was enormous. At first, it felt wrong. My body kept bracing for the next demand, the next guilt trip, the next family emergency disguised as closeness. I would set my phone down and then check it 5 minutes later, even though I knew there would be nothing from them. Grief settled in strange places. At the grocery store when I reached automatically for my father's favorite coffee because it was on sale. At the gas station when I almost called my mother to complain about the price. On Sunday mornings, when I realized I no longer had to spend an hour talking Layla through problems she would ignore by Monday. People don't talk enough about how setting boundaries can feel like withdrawal. When chaos has been your normal, peace sounds unfamiliar at first. Tessa kept me steady. She came over with groceries one weekend and helped me reorganize my apartment just because she said my space should stop feeling like a recovery room. We packed up old boxes, donated clothes, cleared drawers. In the back of my closet, tucked behind winter boots, I found a small fireproof pouch where I kept important documents. Inside were copies of bank transfers, screenshots, receipts, money order stubs. I sat cross-legged on the floor and spread them around me. Over 6 years, I had sent my family more than $38,000. 38,000. The number hit like a body blow. My lungs seized. I had known I helped a lot, but not like that. Not enough to make a used car, a down payment, a year of peace. There it was, laid out in faded print and confirmation emails. Rent, utilities, dental work, car repairs, credit cards. A security deposit for an apartment Layla lost 3 months later. A small temporary loan for my father that had never come back. I felt sick. Then, just beneath the sickness, I felt something steadier rising. Not vengeance, clarity. That amount of money was why my savings had stalled, why I was still renting, why every future plan I made seemed to move 2 steps slower than everyone else's. I had been funding a family image while starving my own life. The next morning, I opened a new bank account at a different credit union. I set up automatic transfers into savings. I met with a financial advisor through a veteran assistance program, and for the first time in my life, every number on the page belonged to me instead of to somebody's crisis. There was something almost sacred about that. My shoulders loosened in small degrees I didn't even notice until one night I got ready for bed and realized my jaw didn't hurt. 3 months passed, then 4. Word reached me through an aunt I barely spoke to that Layla's boyfriend was gone, the truck was totaled, my father had borrowed against his retirement account, and my mother was telling people I had changed since the medal. Not because I thought I was too good, but because recognition had gone to my head. I could almost admire the neatness of it. In their story, the problem wasn't what they had done. The problem was that I finally stopped absorbing it quietly. Then came the twist I never saw coming. In late November, a certified envelope arrived at my apartment. My pulse stumbled the moment I saw my parents' return address. I opened it at the counter with a butter knife because my fingers had started sweating. Inside was a short handwritten note from my mother and a check, not for all of it, not even close, but enough to make my hand go still. The note said she had been cleaning out a drawer and found the record of one of the larger amounts I had sent years ago. She said she could not repay everything, but she wanted to return something. She wrote that seeing my medal photo in the local paper had made her realize how often she had expected me to be unbreakable. She said she had mistaken my reliability for endless capacity, and by the time she understood the difference, she didn't know how to say it without sounding like she was asking for forgiveness she hadn't earned. I read the note 3 times, my throat burned. There was no dramatic apology, no complete transformation, no movie-perfect ending, but there was honesty, maybe for the first time in years. I sat at the kitchen table with the note in one hand and the check in the other while outside the rain tapped softly against the window. Part of me wanted to call immediately. Another part wanted to tear the note in half. Instead, I did nothing for 2 days. Then I drove home. Not to reunite, not to pretend everything was fine, just to see what truth looked like in person. The house seemed smaller than I remembered, the paint more peeled, the front steps more crooked. My mother opened the door before I even knocked twice. She looked older in a way that had nothing to do with age. Her shoulders curved inward. Her eyes filled the second she saw me, but she didn't reach for me. I respected her for that. We sat at the same kitchen table where homework battles, bill discussions, and holiday meals had blurred together my entire childhood. The clock on the wall still clicked too loud. The refrigerator still made that low, tired hum. My father stayed in the garage at first. Cowardice or pride, I couldn't tell. My mother talked in starts and stops, the way people do when they've rehearsed sentences that collapse once they're needed. She admitted they had always relied on me more than they should. She admitted Layla knew exactly how to stir sympathy and had been allowed to do it for too long. She admitted she had told herself I was fine because the alternative meant facing what they were doing to me. Every now and then, her voice cracked and she pressed her lips together until the color drained from them. Then she said the one thing I needed and never expected to hear. She said I should have been the one they showed up for. Simple, late, true. I didn't melt, I didn't rush around the table to forgive her. I just sat there with both feet flat on the floor, feeling my heartbeat slow from a sprint to something human. The pain was still there, but it was no longer fighting to be believed. My father came in halfway through. He looked at me once, then at the table, then at his hands. I had spent years imagining what I would say if he ever apologized. In reality, words did not come first. He set an envelope in front of me. Inside were photos from my ceremony, not ones he had taken, obviously. Tessa had posted some online and he had printed them. On the back of one, in his cramped writing, he had put that he was ashamed he was not there. That he had called my medal a shiny piece of metal because he knew if he admitted what it really meant, he would have to admit what he chose instead. That broke me more than yelling ever could have. My breath hitched so sharply my ribs hurt. I looked down because if I looked at him too long I would either cry or leave. He said he had spent months waiting for his anger to feel righteous and instead it just made the house feel empty. He said for the first time in his life, helping Layla had started to feel less like protecting his child and more like feeding a fire that kept burning everyone else. He didn't ask me to make it better. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for anything. That was how I knew he meant at least some of it. We did not fix years of damage in one afternoon. That only happens in stories that lie. Real hurt doesn't vanish because someone finally names it. Trust rebuilds slower than that if it rebuilds at all. I saw Layla before I left. She came in late, hair thrown up, sunglasses on even though the sun was almost down, carrying the stale scent of smoke and vanilla body spray. She froze when she saw me. Her mouth tightened. For one brief second, I saw the old pattern straining to snap back into place, the expectation that I would smooth this over, that I would understand, that I would return to my role so everyone else could keep theirs. Then she noticed the envelopes on the table and my parents' faces and realized something had shifted without her permission. She said I was being dramatic. Some people never change their script. I stood up slowly. My hands were steady. My voice was too. I told her I loved the version of her I kept hoping would appear, but I was done paying for the one standing in front of me. I told her if she wanted a relationship with me, it would have to be built on honesty, accountability, and respect, not family titles and emergency texts. I told her being related to me was not a lifetime pass to my time, money, or peace. Then I picked up my keys and walked out while she was still trying to process that I hadn't argued. The air outside was cold enough to sting. My lungs expanded so sharply it almost hurt. For a second, standing by my car in the fading light, I felt 12 years old and 30 years old at the same time. Small and powerful, grieving and free. The house behind me was quiet. Here's what changed everything, really changed it. Not the medal, not even the barbecue. It was the moment I stopped begging people to prove they loved me and started deciding what access they had to me based on how they treated me. That was the turning point. That was the rescue, not the one in the ravine. The one where I finally pulled myself out. Over the next year, my life got larger in ways that had nothing to do with achievement. I moved into a small townhouse with a patch of grass and a front porch that caught morning light. I planted herbs I kept accidentally overwatering until I learned better. I slept through the night more often. I took trips without feeling guilty for not financing someone else's disaster. I framed the medal and hung it where I could see it from the kitchen, not as a trophy, but as evidence. Evidence that my life happened even when nobody clapped. Evidence that courage counted even when it went uncelebrated at home. My contact with my parents became cautious, limited, and real. They stopped asking for money. That mattered more than any apology. My mother sent recipes and sometimes photos of the dog. My father, slowly and awkwardly, started asking about my work in ways that sounded like actual interest instead of obligation. We were not healed, but we were honest enough to stop pretending that silence was the same as peace. Layla drifted in and out at the edges. Once she sent a message on my birthday that simply said she hoped I was doing well. No request attached, no hidden hook. I stared at that message for a long time. Change, if it comes, often arrives so quietly you almost miss it. I wrote back that I hoped she was doing well too. Nothing more. Some doors don't need to be slammed forever. They just need locks. Every now and then, someone asks whether I regret drawing tea. Hat line over one missed event. They say family makes mistakes. They say life gets messy. They say maybe I should have understood. And every time I feel that old familiar pressure, the one that used to bend me into whatever shape would keep everybody else comfortable. Then I remember the hallway, the empty seats, the barbecue video, the phone call asking for money before congratulations, and the strange peace that arrived only after I finally said no. It was never about one event. It was about a lifetime of being told, without anyone saying the words, that I mattered most when I was useful and least when I needed something back. The ceremony simply stripped away all the excuses. It held up a clean mirror. And painful as that was, I'm grateful for it now. Some truths only hurt because they are carrying you toward freedom. So yes, my family chose my sister's barbecue over my medal ceremony. At the time, it felt like humiliation. It felt like proof that nothing I did would ever outweigh whatever chaos demanded their attention next. But what happened after mattered more. I stopped offering loyalty to people who treated it like an unlimited resource. I stopped confusing love with access. I stopped believing being needed was the same as being valued. And in the quiet that followed, I found something I had never really had before. Not revenge, not victory. Self-respect. And once you finally feel that settle into your bones, once you realize your life does not need to shrink just because other people are more comfortable when it does, everything changes. Because the hardest thing to accept is also the thing that sets you free. Some people will only notice your worth after they lose the version of you that kept saying yes.